Hello everybody, now we're going to talk about connected storytelling and how we can use the Vizrt platform to simplify the way we're telling stories. We have been about storytelling really from the start of our company, 20 years back, like for instance this virtual studio. And we're still very much about storytelling, but the way that our stories are consumed is vastly different than before. In addition to the traditional platforms, a lot of new platforms has been introduced, as well as a different set of devices with different screen sizes and layouts and so on. It's quite interesting because this year is the first year that's projected to actually be the year that we're consuming more content on the internet than on television. And we believe that we have to address this challenge in a proper way. We have to adapt the way we're creating content to the way people are consuming content. Now, we have identified three main areas where we see that we have to improve our production. The first one being branding, and being recognized on all of these platforms are key to succeed in this 21st century. The second part is the live production. How can we really streamline our live production to create more content in a simpler way? And all of that high-level content, high-value content needs to be repurposed so we can monetize it on every platform, both live and non-live. So that's the three parts. We're going to start off with branding. So let's start off with a proper election introduction. So when speaking about branding, one of the first things that comes to mind is graphics. And we want to run some election graphics here, because data-driven graphics is really good for branding. It's great to tell stories that are complex, full of data, and make that simple and beautiful for the viewer back home. But graphics is only one part of what we can do with branding. And I want to show you an example where one of our customers, MediaCorp in Singapore, they have been able to create an opening sequence, really extending the brand from the video wall into the studio with robotic cameras, augmented reality graphics, and all other aspects of their traditional headline sequence. But what's interesting is that they're doing this in a simpler way than before. Even though the backend is complex, the Vizrt studio interface and our director here is able to operate all of these things. So let's roll and see how it looks. So you can see that the opening sequence actually starts fairly simple with a regular clip, like any other opening sequence does. But when we're starting to look in and pay attention to the screens above my head here, you can see that we can pull that opening sequence actually into the studio space here, and I can start interacting with the opener itself. So here you can see that I can actually be, as a presenter, be more close to the content and being able to operate and see that in my studio. Now we can also pull in some opening clips here and get some headlines going as well. And here you see that we can really bind the studio together with my content. And this is as simple as operating any live production for the director. So he can take next whenever he wants, and he can bring and follow the presenter while we're bringing this content to life. Now, live production is of course very important in the control room, but that's usually not where the stories are born. The stories are usually born in the newsroom system. So I want to take a step back and start off in the newsroom system and show you how we are creating stories there. So let's bring up my newsroom system. Okay, today we're using iNews. So here you can see my rundown. This is the kind of a standard iNews layout, but it could really be any other newsroom system as well. But on your right side here, we have our Pilot Edge. Pilot Edge is Vizrt's HTML5 plugin. It's really the gateway to any tool from Vizrt for journalists. So we can browse, for instance, for graphics here. We can start filling out the content of the graphics. And what you can see here is that we get an instant preview of how this will look on air. So we can really understand how the content will be branded on air using a journalist tool here. But we can take this one step further, and what we're able to do is that we're also able to browse for video files and clips inside the same interface. So I can bring this in and I can start browsing my video clips as well. And notice that the journalist never needs to leave this interface. This is basically catering everything the journalist needs for that story. So here we can create a timeline, and we can actually also, interestingly enough, bring graphics down on that same video clip. So we can combine it here, and this is a system called metagraphics. So metagraphics allows the journalist to visualize the whole template and basically see exactly how the composite will be on air. But more than that, we're storing the graphics and video separately. That means that it's not burnt in any system, and the final destination is defining how this will look on air. So I can visualize this and I can bring that into my rundown. And as soon as I brought it into my rundown, I can go over to my control room and have a look. So let's go over to the control room, and this is the rundown in real time from iNews presented in a different way. This is Vizrt, our studio automation interface. Here I can see what's currently on air, which is my camera. I can see what's next, that's the opener here. And after that, it's the reporter clip that we just prepared in our newsroom system. But more than that, I'm also able to control all these different devices inside the same interface. One interface that controls all the elements in my control room. Now we could stop there and say, okay, this is great. This is like wonderful. Now we can create one main live linear production. But we are all about multi-platform. So instead of creating one broadcast, we want to create multiple. So let's bring in all the formats and see how it looks in multi-format. So here you can see that we're running different clips for different formats. Here on this mobile phone, it looks significantly different than, for instance, for the TV. And bringing in the clip that we just prepared, you can also see that we get the full version that we visualized in the newsroom, but we also get separate versions here, which is adapted to the platform that we're viewing it on. So this is device-adapted graphics, a principle that we're using a lot in Vizrt. But what we can do furthermore is to also use that same data-driven graphics to also get a different view for different platforms. So on these big 16:9 screens, we're able to see the horizontal-oriented side-by-side graphics. But on this 9:16 mobile phone, we rather want to have them stacked on top of each other, so we optimize for that phone as well. Now we could bring this even one step further. So let's run the MediaCorp opener again and see how that looks in multi-platform. So here we're starting off the same way. We can see that we're running the same clip in all of these platforms, regardless of what platform we're consuming on, because we want to show off how the augmented reality graphics looks together with all the other different elements, right? But this is really just the beginning here, because one of the challenges in the graphics, we have actually shrink down the headline clips. And we don't want the viewers to just have to see a little tiny picture on the screen. So we really want to use the full screen. So let's go into the headlines, and you can see suddenly we're starting to bring different content to different screens. Some full screen with adapted graphics, and some in the augmented reality graphics, just as before. And this does not add complexity for the director. It's the system in the background that actually allows us to control this in different ways. So you can see that the whole workflow is supporting device adaptation, not only the graphics or the videos. So this is great. Now we have all the live content that we need. But that's really not enough in this day and age. We have to be able to take that content and monetize it on all the platforms that we have. So while I've been talking here today, we have been ingesting every minute of this content already. And this content is now available for me as a growing file in my Vizrt content management system. What I'm able to do here is to actually open that content in whatever interface I want. For instance, here in Vizrt, my online media creation and publishing tool. So we can open the media here. And here you can see this is my growing file running in Vizrt. So open that. And this is the presentation I just started on. You can set in and out points and drag that down to the rundown. To the timeline. So now we're creating a new timeline based on this. And notice that this is very similar workflow from the live workflow that the journalist was just doing. That means that the journalist can either create live stories or online stories very effective. Now this is great, because this is a 16:9 story, and of course I want to have a 16:9 story. For instance, YouTube really looks really nice with 16:9. But Facebook, for instance, has square footage, so maybe we should have a look at the square footage. Here you can see that we're adapting the graphics as a preview for square footage as well. And if I wanted to, I could also adapt the panning to make sure, for instance, here we're getting half the Vizrt logo in and so on. Doesn't really look that nice. So we can actually pan out the content whatever way I want. Or just skip the Vizrt logo completely and get only this view. We can preview that. And now this is great, because now we can publish to any platform that we wanted to. So if I'm going to the publishing menu here, I could publish to, for instance, a landscape destination, a portrait mode, or Facebook, YouTube, whatever platform I want, even back to my broadcast infrastructure if I wanted to do that. But instead of having to render out each and every version now, I just hit publish. And that's it. Now the journalist is done with his job. What that means is that all the technical stuff is happening in the background, while the journalist can actually start creating his next story. So that means that we can use as much time as possible on the content creation rather than on the technical details. So as you can see, we have a platform that can support all the different devices, both live and non-live, and allowing the journalist or any other media professional to access the kind of interface they need, whether it's the director in the control room, a journalist creating a live story, or a journalist creating a story for social media.